Hello and welcome to Smart Money. I'm Alishia Seckam. Well, her childhood career ambition may have been to become an astronaut. Science may have influenced her perspective, and Madame Curie may be her biggest inspiration. But Leila Fourie's career journey has taken her down a different path. She's, of course, currently CEO of the JSE, and she joins us in conversation now. Leila, thanks so much for your time today. So right at the top, what shifted enough for you to have pursued a career in finance instead?
Hi, Alishia. Well, I think my career really began when I was a child. I came from very humble beginnings, and I started what was probably a car washing local community in my suburb. I started working at a very early age, and I really find finance to be a dynamic and challenging and ever-changing environment, and that's congruent with my curious mind and my interests.
And in 2019, that's when you actually took the reins of Africa's largest stock exchange, right? So how did your career path get you to that point? Because it was 25 years long, and it's that led you to becoming CEO of the JSE.
Absolutely. Alishia, the leaders that we are today are very much a function of the lessons, and often very invaluable lessons, that we learn along the way. And it's very much of a sort of defining collection of moments. Someone much smarter than me calls them kairos moments, or moments that matter and moments that last forever. And these are lessons that I've learned that have affected my leadership DNA and have really brought me to the role of the CEO of the JSE, and many mentors, both in financial services, locally and internationally, have built my executive armory and enabled me to lead in what is probably the biggest moment of crisis through, for example, the pandemic at the exchange.
Yeah. Many would say, though, a stark contrast, right? So interested in the sciences once upon a time, so interested in, the astroturf more than anything else, So any regrets having gone down the finance route?
No, absolutely no regrets. I am a very diverse person, and I read voraciously, and I have deep interests in the sciences and also in adventure and nature, and I'm able to pursue those interests in my own personal time. And I found that the financial services environment has really challenged me intellectually and in terms of my entrepreneurial and my leadership style. So I don't have any regrets. And I intend to really make the most of the short time that I have, both in the commercial sense and on on Earth generally.
Yeah. Well, now you're well settled into the seat, right? And knowing what it takes, do you think your career in finance up to that point, having assumed, the chief position at the JSE, had adequately prepared you for leading a prominent financial institution like the JSE? What do you think's helped you the most?
I think, if I come back to those Kairos moments, my interactions with others have certainly helped me. And to be honest, nothing can prepare you to lead a stock exchange through a pandemic crisis like I was faced with 6 months after I took the roll up. I was on my own at home in South Africa. My family were in Australia, and it taught me profound lessons. And there was really, I think, probably the biggest lesson that it taught me was a reversion to basic values, peeling off the facade. And even if we look back in history, in 165 AD, Marcus Aurelius had to deal with the Antonine Plague, and I read up quite a bit about his life, and I learned by looking backwards at historic figures who have had to face similar things in completely different times. So, this whole concept of stoicism and being being or acknowledging that we are always at the mercy of events that are outside of our control, both during the pandemic and even now macroeconomically. And, lessons that I learned from him was, that everybody else fled, but he remained, he stayed, he showed up. He actually died of the Antonine plague in the end, but he showed empathy. He gave his wife's jewelry away to support the medical needs of others. And, even on his deathbed, he planned for succession. So I think that nothing prepares you for any senior role. It's always a very lonely role. But if you're open-minded to other people's experiences and other people's views, your leadership ability takes you through and really makes a big contribution to individuals' lives around you and to organizations. And I found that to be the case, particularly during the period of the pandemic.
Yeah. Having said that, Leila, some might say perhaps a bit unorthodox, right? And you alluded to it, leaving a family back in Australia, leaving a successful career back in Australia to come back to South Africa. So why that decision? Was it the sheer title, the job offer on the table that convinced you to come back?
There were a number of dynamics at play. My kids are much older and independent and married and settled. So they weren't dependent on me and living in my home. I felt that, being in my mid-50s, I'm at the sort of latter stage of my line management career, and I wanted to do something that makes a difference. I had a successful career in Australia. I wasn't one of those South Africans that spoke negatively about the country when I moved. I was also extremely happy in Australia. The lifestyle suited my value system, spending a lot of time outdoors, and I have a number of very, very good friends now from that period. And I probably will plan to go back because my kids are there and my granddaughter's there. But ultimately, for me, it was about going back to my roots, making a difference, making a real contribution. I, of course, never foresaw the pandemic situation, which really allows one to leave one's leadership imprints and make a genuine difference to society. But nonetheless, on a commercial level, the JSE is the type of organization that introduces structural change and has the ability to innovate and genuinely change the entire industry. And I've worked very hard to try and do that in as many avenues as I can. And I feel grateful for the opportunity to give back and to contribute to the land of my birth.
Yeah. Well, you came back to face a challenging few years in the local market, right? And very few challenges come without their own teaching. So what have been the biggest lessons you've learned since becoming the chief executive of the JSE?
Well, I think the biggest lessons that I've learned were really during the period of the pandemic. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's a reversion to basic values, and it's about having strong views that are lightly held. And I quote many other people that come before me, and it's about having an imagination and the ability to galvanize people into action, and not doing everything yourself. Because if you try to do everything yourself, it doesn't scale. So I think it's really important to make sure you empower the people around you. And micro-affirmation, particularly during the crisis, was very important. People need incremental affirmation. They, if they're moving the needle, they don't really need only affirmation only during major milestones. So you need to be there to help them and support them, but they need to solve the problems themselves. And the other lessons I've learned, and I think South Africa teaches these lessons more than any other country, is the importance of diversity. And that is ability diversity, cognitive diversity, and also gender diversity. And in this country, we embrace the importance of diversity in a way that I haven't seen particularly developed world countries embrace. So I've learned many, many lessons along the way, and I'm very grateful for the giants on whose shoulders I've stood so that I could see further, because they've really taught me those lessons. And that's a sort of quote from Newton, Isaac Newton, which I'm just paraphrasing.
And South Africa teaches you a whole lot of adaptability as well. And that a key characteristic, right, for any leader, adapt in order to survive. So that in part teaching or touching on your leadership approach. And it's under your leadership, despite difficult conditions, that the JSE delivered a strong revenue performance in 2023. What are you putting that growth down to?
Well, we are in very difficult times, and we've had to focus on the controllables. We delivered a very strong set of results by focusing really on our strategy to diversify, and also making sure that we remained focused on the core. So despite very uncertain global economic times and shifting asset allocations between domestic and international investors, we continued to innovate to offer a very compelling trading and non-trading offering. And we made important progress in our acquisitions and our non-trading revenue, which diversified and protected us against the downturn that we had experienced in the trading environment. We also we partnered and collaborated with others in order to deliver innovation. So we launched our private markets, we launched a carbon market, and we've also just announced a collaboration with Amazon Web Services. And the first area of focus of that will be one of our large back office systems, transformation of that. So it's really about being innovative and collaborating with those people who are able to deliver very rapidly rather than trying to control everything ourselves.
Still, and despite all of that being in the works and contributing to your growth, Leila, over the last few years now, the number of delistings off the JSE has created quite a bit of noise, right? Because it hasn't come hand in hand with significant enough a listings pipeline to fill in the gaps. But the likes of JP Morgan Chase seem to be upbeat about the tide turning and companies considering IPOs yet again. What are you expecting in terms of new listings in the coming years?
Yeah, so the listings situation is a global phenomenon, and it's been going on for a couple of decades now. It seems to be attracting more attention in the press recently. We have a healthy pipeline of listings, and those include both SA-based businesses and offshore companies across various sectors. We've seen an expansion in the unbundling of operations. We saw a very successful unbundling on the 11th of March of April from Transaction Capital, and that was of We Buy Cars. We are also expecting Rainbow Chicken to unbundle from RCL and Boxer to unbundle from Pick n Pay. These are important initiatives because they unlock shareholder value, and they really create a valuation realization, and they optimize the capital allocation for these large companies. In addition to those unbundlings, we've also seen a couple of mining companies and property-related REITs who are looking to inbound list from, for example, the LSE or NASDAQ. And then Coca-Cola Beverages Africa has also, been looking to dual list for quite some time now. And really, it's about making sure that the macroeconomics are certain enough. So we are seeing a bit of a shift, but it's early days, and we're cautiously optimistic on that.
Yeah, like you said, a question ago. An answer ago, rather, the onus on the JSE to innovate as well, to make the prospect an enticing one, a lucrative one. And you've got all of these innovations and big projects, on the go. As far as those macroeconomics are concerned, though, are you worried?
Look, if I was an American, I might be a bit more worried than I am in South Africa. I think the election looming for America is profoundly more concerning than South Africa. And I think I don't think as South Africans we give enough credit to the resilience of the South African environment, both politically and economically. So there are worrying factors, of course, unemployment, low growth, and our security and violent crime are all major concerns. But there are also some very positive aspects, and so on balance, I would say I'm a bit more pragmatic, and I'm focused more on those small things that genuinely can move the dial. And I think an enormous amount of policy shifting has happened in the energy space. I think we're starting to see the initial stages of logistics shifting, and certainly more needs to be done to grow the economy and to improve unemployment. But there are some promising green shoots, and so I'm hopeful that we settle after the elections, and that we can start focusing on those things that matter, like growth and employment.
Absolutely. And Leila, I know, mentorship and building future leaders and skills resonates personally for you. So before I let you go, any words of wisdom for young finance professionals out there who are looking to you now for inspiration, for motivation on their journeys to the top?
I would probably say, and this might be as relevant for women as it is for men, is that if I look back at my former self, what would I tell myself? I would be more confident in my abilities. I would back myself. I was always very diligent, and I think diligence and commitment and loyalty pays off. But remain curious and remain resilient, and just keep focused on your goal, and don't use an internal locus of control. Don't attribute difficult circumstances to others. Just think about how you can control the outcomes, and those distinguishing between the controllables and those that aren't controllable. And be optimistic.
Absolutely. Well, Leila, what a pleasure it's been catching up with you today. Thanks so much
Thank
for
you.
having joined us.
Thank you.